Chapter 12. On one side of the table, Baxter sat with Griff, and on the other side, Woody sat with Theo. The opposing sides faced each other as the tension slowly faded and reality set in. Baxter had an ice pack on the side of his face, and his left eye was swollen and completely closed. It looked awful. Woody was proud, though he suppressed a smile. With suspension coming and angry parents to deal with, smiles were not possible. Griff's face showed no damage, nor did Woody's. Theo's bottom lip was puffy, and there was a spot of dried blood on it. He tapped it with a tissue. His more serious wound was a throbbing head, courtesy of a kick at the bottom of the pile by either Baxter or Griff, but he did not mention this. Mr. Mount sat at the end of the table and stared at the boys. He had angrily pulled them apart and marched them down to the library and into the small study room where they were now sitting and cooling off. As the seconds and minutes ticked by, the boys settled down. Their breathing slowed. Their heart rates were returning to normal. Nothing like a good fight to get the pulse racing and the blood pumping. "What happened?" Mr. Mount finally asked. All four boys stared at the table. Nothing, not a word. "Could this have anything to do with the rumor that Theo got arrested yesterday?" Mr. Mount asked, looking squarely at Theo, who did not take his eyes off the surface of the table. Mr. Mount knew that Woody was a hothead and Baxter liked trouble. He also knew that Griff followed Baxter around like a new puppy. He would never believe, though, that Theo Boone would start a fight or jump into the middle of one. But Mr. Mount had once been a boy, and he understood things. The way he figured it, Baxter and Griff were picking on Theo, and Woody defended his friend. There were voices outside the room. Mr. Mount said, "I think Miss Gladwell's here. I wouldn't want to be in your shoes." With that, he stood and left the room. As soon as the door closed behind him, Woody snarled, "Nobody rats, okay? I mean, nobody rats. Not one word." As soon as the words left his mouth, the door opened wide and Miss Gladwell stormed in. One look and the boys knew they were dead. She stared at them as he slowly took a seat at the end of the table. Mr. Mount eased into the room, closed the door, and stood against the wall. He was there as her witness. "Are you okay, Baxter?" she asked without a touch of sympathy. Baxter nodded slightly. "And Theo, is that blood on your bottom lip?" Theo nodded slightly. She stiffened her spine, frowned even harder, and began, "Well, I want to know what happened." Neither boy moved the tiniest muscle. All 7 eyes, Baxter had only one workable at this point, were glued firmly at something fascinating, though invisible, on the table. Silence as seconds passed. Her face became redder, her frown even harsher. "Fighting is a very serious offense," she lectured. "We do not tolerate fighting at this school, and you've known this since you've arrived here in 5th grade. Fighting carries an automatic suspension. A suspension goes into your file and becomes part of your permanent record." "Not exactly," Theo said to himself. Sure, it might be a permanent record, but it would never leave the middle school. No college or law school or potential employer would ever know that a student got suspended for fighting in 8th grade. "Theo," she said sternly, "I want to know what happened. Look at me, Theo." Theo slowly turned and looked at the rather frightening face of his principal. "Tell me what happened," she demanded. Theo, unable to maintain eye contact, focused his attention at a spot on the wall and clenched his jaws. On the four, Theo was the leader. Of the four, Theo was the leader. Griff was a follower. Woody and Baxter generally moved within the pack. If Theo kept his mouth shut, then the other 3 would too. This was Miss Gladwell's first mistake. The way to crack a case with multiple defendants is to separate them. Theo, if in charge, would isolate Griff into a small room with several grim-faced adults, administrators, coaches, people with clout and authority. They would explain to Griff that the other 3 boys were talking and pointing the finger at him. "Griff, Baxter is saying that you were taunting Theo. And Griff, they're saying you threw the first punch," and so on. Griff wouldn't believe this at first, but after a few minutes of getting hammered at, he would eventually start talking. Once he gave his version, he would be told that it didn't jive with the other three. So obviously, Griff was lying. Lying would only compound his troubles. Lying plus fighting would lead to an even longer suspension and probation. Griff would then become desperate to make it known that his version was indeed truthful and accurate. Once the strategy was used on all four boys, they would be singing like birds, and the truth about fighting would become clear. This, of course, would require deception on the part of the authorities, but such tactics are permissible under the law. On the other hand, Miss Gladwell's strategy involved no deception, and she would learn nothing from the boys. Theo was happy that she did not understand basic police interrogation tactics. Theo said nothing and returned his gaze to the table in front of him. His refusal to speak, to rat, meant all four would go down together. So he continued, Baxter, who punched you in the eye? Baxter lowered the ice pack and set it on the table. The ice was working and the swelling had gone down a little. He almost said, I don't know, but caught himself. He, of course, did know. There was no benefit in lying at this point. Just clam up like Theo and suffer through this. There was a long pause as he waited. The air was thick with tension and looming trouble. None of the boys had ever been suspended, though Woody and Baxter had been on probation a couple of times. Miss Gladwell had been informed early that morning. The internet was buzzing with the rumors that Theo had been arrested for the theft and was going to court. She had been shown the photo posted on Gash Mail. She had planned to meet with Theo at some point during the day and offer her support. Now she was faced with the unpleasant task of suspending him and the other three. Finally, she said, I suspect that either Baxter or Griff said something about Theo getting into trouble with the law. Maybe getting arrested or something like that. Since Woody and Theo are classmates and good friends, I suspect that Woody intervened and this started a fight. Am I right about this, Griff? Griff jerked as though he'd been slapped, but he quickly composed himself so he could say nothing. Not a word. He narrowed his eyes and gritted his teeth and gave her nothing. She waited, and her frown disappeared. The boys were playing games, so she would play along. Baxter tapped the table nervously but said nothing. Boys, we can sit here all morning, she said. Behind her, Mr. Mount tried not to smile. Secretly, he admired the boys for protecting each other and facing their punishment together. Mr. Mount, would you take Baxter, Griff, and Woody outside? She asked. She said, I want to talk to Theo alone. Without a word, the three followed Mr. Mount out of the room. When the door closed, Theo felt totally isolated. Look at me, Theo, she said softly. Theo turned and made eye contact. I know you've had a bad week, she said. You feel as though you're a victim. The police are after you. Someone is trying to frame you for the burglary. Someone is stalking you. Someone is bullying you. Your face is all over the internet in that photo of you and your parents leaving the police station. Lies are being told. Rumors are out of control. I understand all of this, Theo. I'm on your side, and I will hope you know this. Theo managed to nod slightly. And I'm certain that you did not start this fight. I want you to tell me exactly what happened, okay? I got in a fight, Theo said. But did you start the fight, Theo? I got in a fight, and fighting is against the rules. He found a strong urge to look away, but somehow managed to stare at her. She was disappointed, even hurt, and Theo felt lousy. He considered her a friend, an ally, a person of authority who was trying to help him, and he was giving her nothing. After a long, tense, nervous, silent pause, she said, So you're not going to tell me what happened? Theo shook his head. It hurt more than when he moved it. Then a cruel question. What will your parents think when I call them and tell them you've been suspended from school for fighting? I don't know, Theo managed to say, horrified by the prospect. Facing his parents would be far worse than getting kicked in the head. A sharp pain stabbed him in the stomach as he saw the looks in their eyes. Okay, please step outside. Theo quickly jumped from his chair and left the room. When he stepped through the door, he saw the other three and ran his index finger across his mouth. Lips are sipped. I didn't rat, and you don't either. Baxter was next. He returned to the room, to the table, as if he might be executed. Did you say anything to Theo about getting into trouble? He asked. No response. Did you taunt him or harass him? No response. Did Woody hit you in the face? No response. Did Theo? Nothing. Would you please step outside and send in Woody? She said. When Baxter stepped through the door and saw the other three, he ran his index finger across his lips. Nobody rats. While Woody was getting grilled by Miss Gladwell, Theo and Griff and Baxter sat on the wooden bench under the watch of Mr. Mount, who felt sorry for the boys. They were all good kids, and nothing would be gained by suspensions. Still, rules were rules. Of the four, Woody would be the last to crack under pressure, and he refused to answer any question from Miss Gladwell. When she asked him if he hit Baxter, he responded, "Name, rank, and serial number only." Very funny, Woody. You think this is a game? No. Did you throw the first punch? I refuse to incriminate myself, he replied. Get out of here. The weakest link was Griff, and when he survived his slow question and answer period with Miss Gladwell by refusing the rat, she assembled the four boys in a room. She said, very well, I'm going to suspend each of you 1 day for fighting and another day for your refusal to cooperate. Today is Thursday, and the suspensions will run today and tomorrow. You will return to classes on Monday, at which time you will begin a 30-day probation. Any violation during the next 30 days, and you will be suspended for a week. The prospect of missing classes for 2 days did not really trouble Theo, but the reality of facing his parents was painful. He thought about calling Ike first because Ike would understand and probably praise Theo for taking a stand. Perhaps Ike could then break the news to Theo's parents and soften the impact. Theo was contemplating this when Miss Gladwell said, I'll call your parents. It took an hour to work out the details of the suspensions and do the paperwork. The boys stayed in the room, at the table, facing each other while Mr. Mount sat, bored at the end of the table. He stepped out once to get the coffee, and while he was gone, Baxter said, Sorry, Theo. No problem, Theo said. Woody did not apologize. Woody's parents and Baxter's parents had jobs. Thus, no one was home during the day. Miss Gladwell explained they would be receiving an in-school suspensions and would be required to sit in separate study rooms at school from 8:40 a.m. until classes end at 3:30. They would be alone with nothing to do but extra homework. No cell phones, laptops, nothing but textbooks. They would eat lunch at their desks, alone. This seemed far worse than their old-fashioned suspensions where they kicked you off campus. Griff's mother was a housewife, so he could stay at home and probably sleep late, watch television, play with the dog, and do whatever he wanted, unless, of course, his parents were ticked off enough to impose penalties. Theo, too, had a place to go, the offices of Boone and Boone. His mother was in court. His father picked him up from school. As they were driving away, Theo said, What about my bike? We'll get it later, his father replied. So far, he had been remarkably cool and undisturbed, at least on the surface. A block or two later, his father said, What happened? It's just between me and you, all right? What happened, Theo? His father snapped. You're not telling Miss Gladwell, are you? I can't rat on the other guys. No, just tell me what happened. Theo told him everything. The details poured forth in a rush, and Theo, who had been unable to tell his side of the story, unfolded. When he finished, they were sitting at the small parking lot behind the office. Are you upset with me, Dad? Theo asked. You know the rules, and you broke the rules, Mr. Boone said sternly. I did, but at the time I had no choice. Mr. Boone turned off the ignition and said, That's the way I see it too. That's the end of chapter 12.